All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, I wanted to grind your gears, so let me just bring up the first story here. Now, I pulled as biased to the left source as I could for this first story here. So this is from pride.com. I don't think you can get any more LGBTQ friendly than that. New data shows that 1 in 4 U.S. high school students identify as LGBTQ plus. As we scroll, the
Mhm.
number of teenagers in the United States who identify as LGBTQ plus, they're limiting letters here. I don't know if they got a letter count they have to stay under or whatever, but it's a lot more than that. In fact, they start with 2S now, which is Two Spirit, because you got to have the indigenous community here. Which, by the way, yes, maybe. So this is a side note. Yes, maybe Two Spirit was what indigenous people referred to very feminine female identifying men at the time, but we don't know if that was a slur.
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't
that,
thought of
that
that.
could have been a slur, and we don't know it. That could have been the FAGGAT or
Yeah.
T word, And it's like, yeah, don't worry about him. That's one of those two spirits, you know. But that's beside the point. But they're leaving off letters here. Is growing rapidly according to the data recently released by the Center for Disease Control. Oh, the CDC is tracking this stuff now, like it's actually a health thing. We'll get to that. The 2021 survey of over 17,000 high school students revealed that only around 75% of those identified as heterosexual. 3.2 are gay and lesbian, 11.9 bisexual, 9% is either questioning or identifying in another way. Female students were more likely than male students to list their sexuality as something other than heterosexual and were 5 times as likely to identify as bisexual. These numbers have shifted compared to 2017. That's important, which found 85% of students identified as heterosexual back then. It's worth noting that the wording of the question seems to have changed as well, allowing for questioning rather than just being uncertain. And the Hill covers this a little bit more completely because they bring up that the questioning was a little bit ambiguous when it came to what was questioning and unsure and everything. So a little bit better reporting from the Hill than from the site that actually benefits from the way they worded it. But still, we get this chart 2015 to 2021. Oh, look, we've got this massive increase. Well, they also included a new category, which was I don't even know what sex is, you know. So, oh, you're questioning.
Hmm.
It's like, do you want to put penis in vagine? What? Oh, you're questioning. So it's a little bit of shenanigans there, but there's more. And
Who
before we
was I
get to more,
listening to recently? Was it maybe Douglas Murray who was ranting about what queer means now, that now it doesn't really mean anything. It just means, oh.
yeah, and queering is actually a thing. You can queer
Mhm.
stuff, like you can queer a forest. Okay, what the hell does that even mean? It means just looking at it differently. Okay, what does that even mean?
Yeah. I think that may have been Douglas Murray on trigonometry that I heard that amusing little rant.
I mean, if you want to say that, then looking at a Monet is queering, right? Because he put a different perspective on reality through art. Okay, if that's queering, fine. But what does that have to do with my gas prices?
Well,
you know?
to an extent, now we've sockeyed all the way back, and the snake is eating its tail. Because, yeah, that's where the queer, as in odd, as in off, as in not normal. Because if you are on the tails of the bell curve, then yeah, that was you. Now it's be different, just like everyone else.
Okay, so I wanted to look at the data because I wanted to look at the actual questions, how
Mm.
they were asked, and how they were asked before. So the first thing you come up with when you do your searches is the actual CDC website, which you get to here, and then you get a bunch of all of these links down here link back to themselves. And I'll click on it here for a second. So you go to this page, no matter which one of those you click. So it's as per usual, the CDC is here's the data, and you go to a story about the data, and then you go to a story that explains where they got the data about the data, and you have to really go around. I'll get to I finally found the actual study, but here's the numbers. And when I first looked at this table, it immediately popped out at me that apparently boys know what they want, because male percent gay and lesbian. Well, you can't be lesbian if you're male. So I mean, I guess if you asked me if I was a lesbian, I'd say yes, maybe I'm in that statistic. I don't know. But I'm assuming if you're male, they asked if you were gay. 2.4%, pretty consistent with historical data. Okay. Bisexual, 4%, a little bit more than gay or lesbian, but still not high for males. Historically, pretty much on par with what we've seen. And questioning, well, not a whole lot, don't know what, because we start figuring that out pretty early in life when you get your first Victoria's Secret catalog in our area, in our age demographic. But now, as soon as you have access to the internet,
All right. No,
realistically.
Sam, we're older than that. It was the Sears catalog for us.
Oh, my goodness. Female, now this is striking. 3.7% gay or lesbian. Still a pretty low number, still pretty in line with historical averages. Well, it has been said in the past, Dr. David Buss confirms this, but there are more bisexual females than males. This is actually normal. This is actually adaptive when you're making coalitions. And also, the sexual price for females is super high in a heterosexual relationship. But if you're in that exploratory age and you don't want to get pregnant, it's almost a little bit beneficial to diddle around with somebody else's not
Hello,
sperm
friends.
producing diddle, right? So you can actually be a little bit expressive, and women are more expressive than men, especially at a younger age. So this actually is not that surprising. And then questioning, 13%. Also not surprising. Women don't know what they want. Just ask one what she wants for dinner and think of the answer. But yeah, that was the first thing that came out, that jumped out at me, is men are actually still pretty damn consistent. It's women that don't know what they want. And what do we know about when we talked about infidelity and questionnaires?
Uh, Women way underreport and men way overreport. Is that
No,
what you're going to?
men were honest and women lie
Okay.
because of perception. How many of those are lipstick lesbians? And anybody who doesn't know what a lipstick lesbian is, it's oh, I like girls too, and then they side kiss. They don't actually want to do that. They just
Or
want to
maybe
look like they're that way.
maybe once you get a little too tipsy and you made out with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
The 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 bisexual, the different for difference sake.
mm-hmm. And in that Pride article, I should have left it up, but I closed that tab to kind of reduce down a little bit. But their conclusion was these numbers are so high because it's more accepting now and there's less stigma. I'm like, no, these numbers are high because they fudged it by adding a category, which adds a good 9% there. And they use more confusing questions, and girls want to look good. And you just made it actually, you added social pressure to identify in this area because you want to look like you're accepting, you want to look like or you're just attention seeking.
Hmm.
So
Oh, imagine that. Young people, teenagers especially, want attention.
yeah, men
Who'd have
didn't,
thought?
boys, I should say boys, because they're still adolescents. Boys didn't really shift. Maybe a tenths of a percentage point it shifted. But when you added social pressure, women jumped in that direction.
Well, I
Go
mean, we,
figure, women are socially oriented,
I mean, for
reputation oriented.
what was it? A year, 18 months ago, where we talked about um the study that showed generationally And okay, sure, there's going to be some degree of social acceptance, so you'd expect those numbers to rise. And in that survey, we did see a slight rise, as you would expect. But between the youngest generation of now and the previous generation, it's slightly more than doubled.
Well, and remember, this is where those numbers come from too, where
Mhm.
they added a category, an ambiguous category, which can be a lot of things. So the numbers aren't exactly what the chart shows you to begin with. Now here's the concerning part, the part that neither the Hill nor, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the Hill article there, nor the Pride article covered. Why do we have these numbers and where did they come from? Why is the CDC concerned about these numbers? Well, remember the thing I clicked
Question.
on here that everything goes from there?
Hmm.
It's because this is about, whoop, did I bring the right one? Yeah. This is
Youth
about
risk behavior, something or
suicide.
other. Uh,
That's why we have these numbers. Suicidal thoughts and behaviors amongst high school students, Youth Risk Behavior Survey, United States 2021. And among the questions, as we go through these, okay, so the 4 questions about suicide themselves. So they were taking an actual survey on, have you had these thoughts? And they were yes, no, have you attempted? So they separated people who had thoughts about it, people who actually attempted it, and they actually had separated out people who attempted and had to seek medical care, who actually hurt themselves enough
mhm.
that it wasn't just mom and dad stopping them and saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" Right? But then they wanted to break this down. Let's look at racial components. Let's look at socioeconomic status, and also sexual orientation. That's actually, I'm okay with this because we need to look at this. And this is where it becomes alarming to me because no one's talking about this part of the damn study. They're saying 1 in 4 kids are gay or not heterosexual, I should say, because
Mhm.
gay was actually the smallest percentage of all that.
Mhm.
Uh, they broke it down with sexual identity, self-reported, and actual sex contacts. So there's 2 categories here. And if we just looked at the sexual identity numbers, sex contacts to me is actually probably the more accurate one
Yeah.
because that's actually following through with the action. And why this is alarming to me is that if we get down to the tables, uh, let's go to sexual identity here. So this column that I'm highlighting here, the ones that go down there, that's the percentage of suicidality within these groups. So of all the high school kids, 100% being, if you added up all of those,
And I assume that's answering yes to any of the levels, any of the 4 questions there.
yes, this one is seriously considered attempting. So this is the first
Okay.
questionnaire. Okay. 11% of those that were suicidal were heterosexual. 35% were lesbian and gay. 40% were bisexual. 28% were questioning. And then 45% were other, which I'm assuming other encompasses a lot of those others, is included in those others because that would add up to more than
Mhm.
100%.
Mhm.
But the numbers are 4 times as high in these other categories for having suicidal thoughts. That's the alarm here that's not being reported on. That's suicidal thoughts. The trend continues with actually attempting. It's pretty much the same.
Well, this is where um Peterson got in so much trouble as he, really when he started to really go off on um
So this is actually
doctors
attempted here.
doctors that were pushing the rainbow agenda and because he clearly as a practitioner he has a lot of sympathy for people who are suffering from mental strain, mental health effects. He has no sympathy for the health providers and practitioners who are pushing an agenda that isn't patient focused.
Well, but that's the thing with this survey. We don't even know about treatment here.
Mhm.
This is just the fact that we're seeing a massive, it's the correlate is so massive. I would say there might be a causal component between not being heterosexual and having suicidal thoughts, which
Wait, and that's
means
what I was getting
something
to.
something is wrong here. And I'm bringing up that Pride article again. That's why I got rid
That
of my
that's what I was getting
screen.
to is this was what was so insidious a couple years ago when they brain fart, what do they call it, the manual for how the DSM-5, I think it was, where they changed the the definition of gender dysphoria, because and it looks like woke speak, but it's more insidious than that, because by changing the definition, they precluded the idea that, well, this, let's take the gender dysphoria out of it. Body dysphoria. If you are anorexic, your weight's not the problem. Your figure isn't the problem. Your body isn't actually the problem.
It is your
That's the
perception of that.
that is a manifestation of an underlying mental issue that you need to identify and work through.
Okay, so here's where they're this is the Pride article again. They're explaining why the numbers are going up. The likely scenario, of course, that increased acceptance amongst their families and peers, as well as their opportunity to learn about LGBTQ plus people from various sources, have created an environment where teens find more support in exploring their sexuality than shame. So their agenda, obviously, is because what they just described there is having their material in schools is leading to the acceptance and allowing people to be themselves.
Mm.
But that's disregarding what the study was about. If that statement was correct right there, then this number would be going down. Because why do non-heterosexual youth, this is so playing steel manning their argument, okay, so why do still non-heterosexual youth commit suicide more or attempt suicide more? Oh, because of stigma would be the answer. Well, if the stigma's gone down, why hasn't that gone down? If the stigma's going, the stigma is going down, yeah, it is actually truly as these things progress, but these numbers are going up. They're doing the Wolf of Wall Street here. They're bumping those numbers up.
Mm-hmm.
And if the stigma was going down, was leading to more people identifying, then the suicidality should go down along with it, because the
Yeah.
stigma is what causes the suicidality. No, oh, there might be some other cause. And we need to be studying that, and we're ignoring it. Sorry, Pride. You're wrong. Told you this wouldn't be long. I mean, there's not much more you can say about that.
No, there's really not. Big picture though, this is why I finally got around to listening to, and this is the first long form interview I've heard of him, of Vivek on Timcast. Uh, what was that, like Tuesday? I think it was Monday
Yeah,
or
like a week
Tuesday.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So I listened to that while I was driving, and this is why I was so impressed with him, because, and if you've been a political junkie, you'll start to recognize the talking points and the sound bites. This is why, to me, there are only three viable candidates. And I think for the most part, most of the Republican electorate agrees. There were only two, and now I say three viable candidates, because only Trump, DeSantis, and Vivek give any sort of indication that they actually know what time it is, that they actually know what's going on. So for this issue, you might
Oh,
hear,
Pence destroyed his with his that Tucker Carlson event.
the I
Oh,
don't that yeah, the I don't care, or it's not my job, whatever he said it
that's
there.
not my concern, I think.
Not my concern. Yeah, it's
Oh,
like,
not my problem is what he said. Not my
yeah,
problem.
him and Asa Hutchinson both. What was on full display there was either how glaringly obtuse the uh uh the machine, the political machine is,
Mhm.
and how blind they are to not knowing what's going on, what time it is, as I say, or else how much they don't care because they're not running for the same thing that we think they're running for. They're running to perpetuate themselves in the machine. So if you hear someone who doesn't really understand the issue, doesn't really understand what has people agitated about it, they might, bring up Bud Light and what's going on there, or they might talk about, you know, uh, you know, mandates. Okay, that's another good swing away from this issue to not just talk about the gender issue. One of the things that so many of the Republican establishment didn't get, and say, well, I'm personally pro-vaccine, but I'm against the mandates. No, 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 you don't get it. It's the mandates are just a symptom. The problem is we don't trust you people. The problem is you're gaslighting us in our face when we have recordings of you saying the exact opposite thing 4 weeks ago. That's the problem. So that is why Vivek was so impressive, because he didn't he didn't just take the bait. He didn't talk about the surface level thing. He didn't uh uh talk about, he didn't give sound bites. He kind of went to the core of, hey, well, what do you think about this thing that is happening? Well, let me kind of dive down to what I think is the root of this, what this thing is an example of.
Yeah. Another thing he pushed a lot in that interview, he actually does a little bit better in some of his other interviews, is I like his idea of a national identity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with every finer point because he says it should be under God and all this stuff. Obviously, I don't agree with that because I don't believe that particularly. But I do believe that when I think the cure for America is a national identity, not necessarily nationalism to the expense of everything else, but using our nationality as the first identifier that we have when we're dealing with each other as other
Mm-hmm.
Americans. That way it's not, oh, you're black or you're white or you're gay or you're trans.
Mm-hmm.
It's, oh, you're American. Well, so am I. Okay, cool. Now we've got common ground and we can discuss other things that we may disagree on. And
Yeah.
I do think that that is important, especially because the United States of America, as I've said before, is the most diverse country in the world. It's also massive. 330 million people is a lot of people.
Yep.
And 14% of them being black, another 16% being Latino and Latina, not Latinx. I've yet to meet a Latinx person. But what, 4% Asian, somewhere around there, some percentage of other, and then 60 something percent white, right? So we've got this massive diversity. And even amongst white, we got Italian and Irish, and you know, you if you we need something other than that identifier to bind us together. We've got Muslim and Christian, and within Christian, we've got Protestant, and we've got Catholic, and within Protestant, we've got Church of Christ,
All
we've
this other
got
stuff.
Baptist, we've got Methodist, we've got Episcopalian, we've got da 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 da. So yeah, those things are fun to have as a mini identity, but it needs to be under an umbrella identity. I don't even mind having Black Pride as long as it's I'm an American first. And then, hey, I also have black skin, and Barry Sanders is one of my heroes. Jackie Robinson, that's a better example. Jackie Robinson is one of my heroes because he helped people that look like me get into Major League Baseball and become part of the mainstream. That's fine. That's great. That's teaching Black history properly, right? But it has to be under the umbrella of, oh, Jackie Robinson was also an American.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably proud to be an American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, this will tell you I am not a glass half full person. As much as I was impressed by
I'll
Vivek's
turn you around
interview,
someday. I'll turn you
a
around someday. I am
afterwards,
definitely happiness and you are cyanide. This is the
and
truth.
I was thinking about, oh, we should talk about this on Wednesday. So I went back to, speaking of white people, defying Hitler. All right. So again, I go back to this book periodically. This was written by someone who was living in England in exile in the late 30s. This was before the war had officially started, and he this was never published. He was writing this as an attempt to explain Germany to the rest of the West of you don't fully understand what's going on there and how bad it's going to be. In much the same way that, you know, Churchill was no great genius. He just took Hitler at his word and said, this is what's going to happen because this is what the guy is saying. All right, so
Some would say that is genius.
true. All right. So this is the beginning of chapter 10, and this really resonates and this is what I mean by knowing what time it is. Then came 1923. That extraordinary year is probably what has marked today's Germans with those characteristics that are so strange and incomprehensible in the eyes of the world, and so different from what used to be thought of as the German character. The uncurbed, cynical imagination, the nihilistic pleasure in the impossible for its own sake, and the energy that has become an int in itself. In that year, an entire generation of Germans had a spiritual organ removed. The organ that gives men steadfastness and balance, but also a certain inertia and stolidity. It may variously appear as conscience, reason, experience, respect for the law, morality, or the fear of God. A whole generation learned then, or thought it learned, to do without such ballast. The preceding years served as a novitiate in nihilism, but in 1923, its high priests were ordained. No other nation has experienced anything comparable to the events of 1923 in Germany. All nations went through the Great War, and most of them have also experienced revolutions, social crises, strikes, redistributions of wealth, and currency devaluation. None but Germany has undergone the fantastic, grotesque extreme of all of these together. None has experienced the gigantic carnival dance of death, the unending bloody saturnalia, in which not only money, but all standards lost their value. The year 1923 prepared Germany not specifically for Nazism, but for any fantastic adventure. The psychological and political roots of Nazism reach further back, as we have seen, but that year gave birth to its lunatic aspects, the cool madness, the arrogant, unscrupulous, blind resolve to achieve the impossible, the principle that might is right and impossible is not in our vocabulary. Nations, it seems, cannot go through such experiences without spiritual damage. I shudder to think that after the next war, the whole of Europe will probably experience a magnified 1923. That is, unless very wise men make the peace. And I don't know that very wise men made the peace, but they at least had another boogeyman to
Mm-hmm.
keep things from spinning out of control. And this is what I mean by, what time it is we are on the cusp of that. And if you go through the rest of the chapter, you see, so one of the things that made me think about this is when they get to talking about the Federal Reserve and what it's been doing to manipulate the currency. So one of the things about 1923 was, if you've heard about hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic, it was 1923. And one of the curious things about that is that the hyperinflation basically started with what is called the Ruhr War. This was when France, as part of the Versailles Treaty, occupied the Ruhr Valley, which is one of the major industrial hearts of Germany. And so, as kind of protest, the Republic and the citizens called for the citizens of the Ruhr to basically go on strike, to not to not let France benefit from their industriousness. And the government subsidized this. So the government subsidized people staying at home for an extended period of time in which the government, would take care of them by printing vast sums of money.
Hmm.
And that was one of the catalysts for what came later, which just completely destroyed the Weimar Republic's currency in 1923. And as he says, it it's not that, and 1923 was also the year of the beer hall putsch, if anyone is familiar with that. And he kind of makes fun of it, but then again, as he says, but they didn't go away, because as he says here in the opening of the chapter, the pump was primed for something. And it just happened to be that Nazism, of all the craziness, Nazism was what rose to the top. But the point he's making is something was going to happen, and it wasn't going to be good because
Mhm.
of all these factors. And that's kind of where we're at, as not just, Western civilization as a whole. If you look at what's going on in France, if you look at the farmer strikes and what's happening in Holland, but for us here in the US, um, we are also on that precipice. And I think uh, the comparisons to the Great War, the war to end all wars. I mean, just think about the arrogance of that end of history kind of idea of, we have been through something so incredible, there will never be another war. And they knew that, yeah, there would be conflicts, but there would never be a war, like a real big nations versus nations war. And World War I was dwarfed by World War II
Mhm.
in scope, in geographical scale, in casualties. I want to say that World War II resulted, well, it's hard to say because so many civilians were killed. You'll see estimates ranging from anywhere from 50 million to 100 million, especially when you start looking into China and you just have no idea how many people the Japanese killed there, because it was such a mess, and the Japanese didn't care to keep records because, you know, as far as they were concerned, it was like literally slaughtering pigs. That is what one uh, Japanese officer said to a foreign observer. Said,
Estimated 15 million military deaths and 38 million civilian.
for World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was this supreme arrogance in the interwar years, especially in the 20s, that we've conquered history. We have conquered
Yeah, World War
humanity
One,
and our impulses.
just under 10 million military and about 10 million civilian.
So,
Which actually makes sense because trench warfare would bleed less into the civilian population than
mhm,
these big giant bombing campaigns and artillery campaigns we saw in World War
yep,
II.
yep. So the the reason we went from World War I to World War II is because you only had a few voices, like Sebastian Haffner, like Churchill, saying, this is getting out of hand and this is going to go to someplace very, very bad. And you had a whole bunch of arrogant elites saying, no, no, we have conquered humanity. We can now pull the right levers, push the right buttons, say the right things, and things will just go on perpetually good, or at least okay.
You mean some globalist elites were blind to the actual problems of the world? I I
Hmm.
I could I've never seen anything like that.
It's far-fetched, I know, but stay
I
with me.
know. Yeah.
Might convince you yet.
So you're trying to make me cynical and I'm trying to make you positive
Mhm,
and optimistic when worlds collide.
mhm.
Usually there's a tornado when two fronts collide. What's the result of this? We're just going out with a whimper, but we're just two old men. Although I did want to be not I want to make it clear that I'm not confused and not questioning.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for that stuff. I'm glad we kept that short and sweet because
Yeah.
I
Did
could
you
go down a
did you
dark rabbit hole with that.
did you want to do what you proposed to me on the clips?
I did, but I haven't had time to go pull up clips for it yet, and I'd kind of like to play the clips. I will do so. The idea I came up with while I was driving to visit my parents is this kind of a clickbaity fun thing. Is we talk about how you're from more from the left, I'm more from the right, and that's certainly the news sphere we consume more. Is I listen to more of the
Yeah,
kind of
I do want to be clear
traditional
though.
Christian conservative
I would
people.
say the classical liberal left, the
Yeah,
libertarian
yeah.
left,
You're
not the woke left. Although I
yeah,
do
the
dive into their stuff, it's just not you said fans of, and I
mm,
dive into their stuff to know what they're thinking, but I'm not a fan.
yeah, what when I say like the left stuff you listen to, I mean people who used to be on the left, but the left has gone so insane that they're now radical right wingers like Dave Rubin. And didn't Tim Pool start out as more of a lefty
Yeah, he was
kind
Occupy
of
Wall Street.
yeah, that's I
Yeah.
thought so. And then he became this radical neo-Nazi. He hasn't moved. You people are just crazy.
Hmm.
So that's what I mean by left as far as that goes, not the woke craziness. So I thought, it might be fun and clickbaity to, you know, every so often pull up a clip from our respective spheres and kind of pierce that bubble of, this is what this person thinks. What do you think about that? So I will give a tease because this one's kind of short and interesting. There were a couple things that I was listening to on the Steve Deace show as I was driving up, and one of the things I said that I thought was really insightful, and I liked the way he phrased this, and I'm curious what you think, and anyone who wants to comment. Paraphrasing Steve Deace here, there's this idea out there that Trump broke all these paradigms. No, he didn't. He broke a lot of norms.
Well, you know what? Let me play one, and kind of since I had some ready, and then you can mull on it while we can do a thing. This is so it'd be just one. I found it on. I went through the shorts of the people that I follow to find some good stuff. So it is clicked to be shorter. It is clipped and everything
Okay.
to be shorter. But you know this guy from coming over and playing his stuff. Let me. I might go down and up on the thing to start it from the beginning because they tend to start on their own. Oh, I didn't share with sound. Hold on. But one of my favorite podcasts is Modern Wisdom
Mm.
with Chris Williamson. And this is his theory on the cynicism safety blanket.
And I'm less likely to seek a relationship with women, and as a consequence, I'm never going
to this. So
I am so the cynicism safety blanket. Cynicism is a guarded response which sets yourself up against disappointment. Its role within the system is to protect you against experiencing anything bad. It is a preemptive strike against a perceived threat. If I tell myself that all women are bad, then I'm less likely to seek a relationship with women, and as a consequence, I'm never going to feel the pain of rejection. If I tell myself that everything is things will never get better, then I'm excused of ever having to try at anything. The cope is framing hope as pathetic and embarrassing and optimism as delusion. The upside of never trying is never having to feel the pain of failure.
That's so good. That is so many people in our society right now. So many.
Since I said I would make you less of a cynic, there,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even have that one planned. I just had it queued up, and we talked about the cynicism. But yeah, so that's one of my favorites because he is full of those insights. But when you watch his podcast, it's because he's I think 600 episodes in with some of the most amazing. He'll have anybody on realistically that is doing good work. So if he comes across something on Twitter where someone is talking about their research, he'll have them on and he'll just politely, as Brits do, plow into them. And over the course of time has created his own little mini hypotheses, and that was one of them. So
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It's hard advice to adhere to. It's hard to accept, but it is
well, as all things that are
yeah.
beneficial realistically.
Well, that's why I try my hardest.
You got to have less birthday pie if you want to lose a few pounds. That's hard to accept.
When I'm talking nutrition and fitness, I have to catch myself and make sure I say simple. It's not easy. It is not easy, or else everyone would do it. But it is rather simple. At least the basics are.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing, because one of the things that some of these episodes are kind of easy for me from a psychological standpoint is because I spend all day, every day telling people things they don't want to hear. And over the course of the last 15 years, I've gotten better at doing it without just looking at them and going, "Are you a fucking idiot?" You know? So yeah, I mean, he does it with a British accent. He also has a voice coach. I don't have that, but it's kind of the same mentality. And you kind of find when you're really diving through and you're not just in an echo chamber, you kind of find your little kindred spirits when it comes to what message you think the world needs at this point as well. So we'll do more than, maybe we'll just finish with a 10-minute bit on, alternate between the two of us putting somebody forward.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yep.
All right. Well,
All right.
we'll do that next time, whenever next time is, and
then
see y'all then.
Friday, yeah, you should get this tonight, which is Wednesday night, if not early Thursday morning. Friday, you'll get Wheel of Time. You'll see we're wearing the same clothes because we're recording it at the same time, but I'm gonna put it out at the right time. But the time we normally record, I will be on the road, so we have to do it now.
All right, see y'all then.
No advice, no anything. I guess the only thing we talked about was suicide. If you are thinking of that, please seek professional help, and stay with us.